It's a new, brighter day for the Florida Gators. How does that change roles on the offensive side of the ball?
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast and Network, your team every day. I am Brandon Olsen, your host, as always. Today's episode is brought to you by Odoo. Great organizations win because operations matter, and that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. And the Florida Gators have a brand new coaching staff that is something to be excited about. But I think one of the things that we really need to acknowledge is that this is going to be usage-wise a very different offense. Well, like we've talked about personnel before, and we're going to talk more about personnel groupings that I think you're going to see more under Buster Faulkner and under Jon Sumrall staff than you saw with Billy Napier. Despite what you should have saw, right? Like last year, we spent time talking about, okay, well, Russ Callaway is offensive coordinator now. Even if he's not play calling, this should be what you see from the offense. This should be the changes that you see. And you never really saw the changes, right? We talked about the personnel changes that should have happened and didn't, and that was incredibly frustrating. But I do think one change you're going to see under Buster Faulkner, especially with the running backs, is 20 personnel, right? And I know Florida Gators fans, you hear 12 personnel and you hate it, right? One running back, two tight ends. And for those who don't know personnel, the two numbers that you get is how many running backs are on the field, how many tight ends on the field. And then for receivers, you have to add up to 5. Okay, so if you're in 12 personnel, it means one running back, two tight ends, two receivers, equal 5. For Florida, with 20 personnel, that means 2 running backs, 0 tight ends, 3 wide receivers, which is a very air raid thing to do, right? I know that when we talk about air raid, a bunch of people go, oh yeah, you spread everybody out. You got 5 wide, you attack that way. And it's like, no, not really. Air raid, a lot of 20 personnel. I think air raid actually might be the, I guess we'll say the system itself, the scheme itself, whatever you want to call it, because every team now calls their own scheme, their own system. It's a whole bunch of different things now. But air raid, I think, uses 20 more than just about any other, backbone, any other skeleton offensively, because even, the spread option teams and the option teams, they've got tight ends on the field, right? But air raid will go 20 personnel, but that also requires your running backs to do a lot more. You could be on the field for run plays and the other back is getting the football. So you're blocking. Right. And that's not a thing that like Jadan Baugh has ever had to do. You look at what Georgia Tech's running backs were asked to do and what Jadan Baugh is asked to do. And Jadan Baugh, I think, was run blocking 29 total snaps last year. And for Georgia Tech, you see their running backs blocking a lot more because they're on the field, but they're not the ones getting the ball. And yes, for Georgia Tech, that does also matter with Haynes King running the football, which, again, Florida's quarterbacks will not be running the football as much. But Jamal Haynes was the starting running back for Georgia Tech. He was run blocking 127 snaps. Malachi Hosley, 88 snaps. Again, Jadan Baugh is 29. Like you're going to be run blocking because the football is going to be going to other backs on the field because there's going to be multiple backs out there. You get to run more horizontally and get out in space and get going against corners and safeties, right? And whatever the nickel position is for that defense. Contribute more as a pass catcher. You get to be on the field more, even if you're seeing the football less. And so for running backs, you need to be able to do a bunch. Explosive plays are more of the name of the game, where with Billy Napier, it was, hey, let's try to be consistent, generate explosive plays here and there, but let's try to be consistent moving the ball downfield. The issue with that, and where I think we're going to veer off for a second here. When we talk about like defenses, right, and people go bend, don't break, the idea is, well, we will let you dink and dunk your way downfield because if you're not challenging us over top and you're going underneath, we're going to let you do that. And then when we get into the red zone, you're going to be screwed because we're going to keep you out of the end zone. But when you get in the red zone, you'll settle for field goals because it's really hard to consistently execute for 12 plays, we'll say, for an offense, right? A lot can go wrong. And so if you're dinking and dunking and just running the football, you're not going to have those explosive plays often. And we're going to limit those explosive plays. And you need to execute 12 plays, right? That means no drops, no missed reads, no missed assignments as a blocker, none of that, right? You need to do that 12 times, sure. Even if you get a touchdown, go ahead. You're not going to be able to consistently execute 12 times often, right? Or 10 times often. You got to earn that. That's why defenses are fine going bend, don't break. And so Billy Napier's offense was essentially, hey, we're going to go underneath and attack that way. And when we get into the red zone, we're going to stall. And that's what happens, right? Buster Faulkner is looking more for explosiveness. We've talked about this before. Jon Sumrall has talked about this before. Buster Faulkner has talked about this before. They are going to prioritize explosive plays and protecting the football. So explosive plays are more of the name of the game here. So for a bunch of guys, and we've talked about it with receivers, right? Like I said with Vernell Brown III last week. I don't know if he's going to have more catches this year than he had last year, but I feel pretty good knowing that I feel confident that he's going to have more yards per catch and actually get into the end zone this year because explosive plays are going to be more available for him. And so I think that matters, where you're looking at an offense where you might have fewer touches, but more yards and more yards per touch matters more, right? Like Jadan Baugh last year had 253 offensive touches from scrimmage, right? So rushes and receptions, 253. On a losing team, by the way, which is relevant because that was the 14th most touches in the country. Okay, 14th most touches in the country. Fourth most for guys that only played 12 games because you had some guys that, above him that played, I think it was 13 and 14. I don't think anybody had more than 14, but you had guys that played more games and so got more touches from him. On a per game basis, 8th highest in the country amongst qualifiers, which for this purpose, qualifiers is if you played in 7 games, I think I said it. He had the 8th most touches per game amongst qualifiers. Again, while losing, and that matters because running backs get the ball more when they're winning. This is a way for Buster Faulkner, 20 personnel, creating explosives, to have him on the field, keep him involved, but also to keep him fresh. Because if he's pass blocking, he's out there, right? He's out there, he's moving, but he's not sprinting. Hell, you could be pass blocking, and if your responsibility on that play is just basically clean up whoever gets through and nobody gets through, you don't have to do much on that play. You're on the field, but you're not doing much. You're conserving some energy, but you're also a threat because you're on that field, right? You could take a play action handoff and then be pass blocking on the right tackle side, and that's your responsibility, and you might not have to do anything more than that. You're on the field. You're a play action piece, so you're a threat, but you're not being asked to expend a lot of energy. And so I think that you'll see fewer touches, but more yards per touch, more yards per rush, more yards per catch. You'll probably see him used in a different way. But also it's important to remember that last year, Florida was very much a one-back system. DJ Lagway had the 2nd most carries on the team with 51. And by carries, I mean like the PFF carries that takes sacks out of the equation. Because I hate that. I know they statistically count as rushes. They're not rushes, right? DJ Lagway, the 2nd most carries on the team, 51. Then you were at 28, 27, and I think it was 17. The carries fell off a cliff for Jadan Baugh, had 253 touches. It was very much a one-back system. It was the first time in Billy Napier's career, really, that you didn't see a stable of running backs. This year, you're going to see more backs, but I don't expect Jadan Baugh to have 25 touches per game. And part of that is because I expect Florida to be in a better spot to win more football games. I expect them to have a more explosive passing attack, a more explosive rushing attack, just be more explosive, have maybe less carries, less touches, but be significantly more effective with those. Personally, I would say, hey, yeah, let's give them the ball 22 times per game. But when you think about it, it's like, all right, well, 21 times per game is 8th highest frequency in college football. Maybe 22 to 25 is not as reasonable as a lot of people are expecting and talking about. We're going to talk more about running back usage and also kind of how that ties into receiver usage under Buster Faulkner when we get back with Locked On Gators. Running a business should not feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of those things talk to each other. That's where Odoo comes in, right? Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place, helping your team move faster, stay organized, and focus on growing the business instead of spending so much time just managing software. It's inefficient. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent. It's about having everyone working toward the same goal. And that's true in sports, just like it is in business, right? You see teams come together and it's like, yeah, I'll take a back seat if it means we're going to win a championship. That matters. Having that kind of selflessness matters. Great organizations win because operations matter. That's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free. Listen to the podcast and on YouTube. And like we talked about wide receiver or running back usage and how that ties into wide receiver usage and all that fun stuff, right? Running back usage matters also because while we talked about 20 personnel specifically, and again, we'll probably do a show one of these days soon talking about the personnel groupings you'll see with Florida, who might be out there in those personnel groupings and what Florida might do out of those personnel groupings, which honestly, we could probably just do a full show about each personnel grouping and call that a day. But running back usage all over the formation is going to be quite different, right? And I don't just mean, oh yeah, sometimes you'll see him out wide. I mean that Buster Faulkner plays running backs all over the formation. Sometimes they're out wide. Sometimes they're in the slot. Sometimes they're the second man in. Sometimes they're the third man in. Hell, you can look at how Buster Faulkner has used just the Georgia Tech backs, because I know non-Florida fans want to go, okay, well, this is what Buster did at Georgia Tech, and so you're going to see a lot of quarterback run game. I don't think that's true. I do think that you can look at what he did at Georgia Tech and see where some of the things are going to carry over. And I'm not saying quarterbacks will not be running the football, but Haynes King ran the football 18 times per game last year. You won't be seeing that from Florida. But one thing you might see is how running backs, specifically the scat back types, were used. Where you watch Georgia Tech throughout Buster's time, and you will see running backs line up as a wing back, which the wing back is, imagine where a tight end is lining up, right? That's where the wing back is. It's putting a running back there, having him face, and you could see an end around, you could see running a route from there, you could see a jet sweep from there, you could see a lot from there, right? You can go in motion to figure things out, but you will see Buster Faulkner is kind of like hiding guys essentially, because you're going to see a lot of pre-motion or pre-snap motion and motion at the snap. And so Buster can kind of like hide guys around there because you're so focused on, all right, these guys are going in motion, that's where they're moving, that the guy standing still that's been lined up as a wingback could just go completely overlooked. And it helps, right? It's hiding things. It's being creative. And so you will see, I don't think you're going to see Jadan Baugh do that much, but in Evan Pryor, you can see Evan Pryor do that. Because again, when you're coming around, like one of the reasons that end arounds and jet sweeps are generally explosive plays is because you're already moving with a head of steam, right? If you're running a sweep, you're already going parallel to the line of scrimmage. If you're running an end around, you're already looping around, right? So you kind of get that head of steam where you can attack and be just, all right, I'm already moving with momentum. And you want to do that with the guys that are generally faster, shiftier players, right? Running backs, they're not as fast as receivers usually. They're not supposed to be, right? They're supposed to be bigger, able to carry more of a workload, more of a bulk of contact. Whereas receivers, you got to run by people like that. That's your thing. Is speed matters a lot. So does technique, but speed matters a lot. And so when you have these fast players that are running end arounds and looping and they've got momentum and they're moving down, that matters. That helps you a lot. So a guy like Evan Pryor, who torched Big 12 defenses last year, get him moving, get him some momentum, and then just let him continue torching defenses. Right. So I can see Evan Pryor being more of that type of running back that we've talked about before. Like I think Evan Pryor might have the second most touches in the running back room, but I don't know if I'd necessarily call him running back two, because if knock on wood, if an injury were to happen to Jadan Baugh, I think Duke Clark would be more likely, or even a London Montgomery would be more likely to take on a bulk of the carries as opposed to Evan Pryor, who I think might be more of a design touch. If you want to call him gadget, you can call him gadget. But more of an offensive weapon. It's like, hey, we're getting you the football at least 8 times per game or 6 times per game, whatever it is. We're going to get you the football X amount of times per game because you're a home run threat every single time. And so that's what we're going to do. But you're maybe not the guy that's going to get us 4 yards. Like, that's not what we're looking for from you. And so I think that matters. I think Evan Pryor can be that guy. Wide receivers will be used on, again, jet sweeps and end rounds. That's going to be a thing. I'm expecting Florida to use a ton of screens, which I know that there's a lot of fans that have really, really started to hate screens and jet sweeps, right? And pop pass. When I say jet sweeps, in this case, I'm including pop passes, which is the Florida Billy Napier, Trey Wilson running across the formation and just take the snap and pop it forward real quick. I'm including that in jet sweep, pop pass. It's the same thing, right? You just pop it forward so that it counts as a pass and you get that passing stat, right? That's all that really means. That's how I view it, is that's all that means. But you look at a team like Georgia Tech, and they ran a lot of screens, right? And I know that people hate that. I know people hate hearing that. I know people hate talking about that, because a lot of Florida fans, we've seen screens, especially under Billy Napier, and they've been ineffective, right? But you watch all these other good teams that we've seen out there in recent years, they throw a ton of screens. Carson Beck last year, a quarter of his dropbacks were screens. Quarter of them. SMU, 21.6%. Kevin Jennings, right? Gunnar Stockton, 22.5%. Drew Mestemaker in North Texas, 19%. Dante Moore at Oregon, 20.7%. Arch Manning, 20.1%. Haynes King, 23%. Darian Mensah, 15.8%. We've seen offenses love these screens. They're easy, quick completions. They are. Carson Beck had 840 yards on screens last year. 4 touchdowns, no picks. You don't throw picks on screens, right? And if you do, you have an issue. Byron Brown threw 2. Just want to throw that out there. But if you, which is the most in the country, Byron Brown, Rodney Tisdale Jr., CJ Carr, and Braylon Braxton threw 2 picks on screens. That was all tied for the most in the country. So I'll throw that out there. But you look at some of the top teams in the country in screens, and Miami, 7 yards per screen. Georgia, 6.5 yards per screen. North Texas at 7.4. Again, I'm just bringing them up because they're a really fun offense. Dante Moore at Oregon, 5.4. Arch Manning, 7.4. Darian Mensah, 6 yards. Georgia Tech, 8 yards per screen. Screens matter because they're efficient passes, quick underneath. I don't have an issue with screens. I don't have an issue with jet sweeps. And I don't think Florida Gators fans should either. I wrote about this, I forgot which game it was, but during the season for swampsignal.substack.com, I wrote about screens, and I was like, the Florida Gators have a screen problem, but it's not because screens suck. Like, I think Florida Gators fans need to stop saying, oh, teams that run screens suck. Mike Bobo sucks because they run screens. They're effective. They're efficient. They're explosive plays. They're awesome. You have to be able to block them properly, though. That's where Florida failed, was that Florida did not coach guys how to block on the perimeter for screens. Florida did not have the offensive linemen that were pulling. Damian George was not getting out in space and blocking a soul out there. It was execution that sucked. Jet sweeps, it wasn't even always execution. It was that they were predictable. That's the thing. Screens don't suck. Jet sweeps don't suck. Billy Napier sucked using those things. Buster Faulkner doesn't. Expect to see screens. Receivers, a lot of them. Vernell Brown, Eric Singleton Jr., expect to see screens from those guys. Expect to see them be way more explosive and way more effective this year. We also have to talk about tight ends, which should be way more effective for the Florida Gators under Buster Faulkner. We're going to talk about that when we get back with Locked On Gators. Support for today's episode comes from Indeed Sponsored Jobs. When workplace chaos hits and you need the right hire, Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps connect employers with candidates who match specific needs like skills, certifications, and location. So less time gets spent searching and more time gets spent finding the right fit. And people are finding quality hires on Indeed right now. In the minute that I'll be talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. People are benefiting from it. If you're not, that's on you. How often do we have to talk about organizations screwing things up? Right? Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes. That's less stress, less time, and more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on Locked On Gators. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free waivers in the podcast and on YouTube. And we're going to talk about tight ends, which, hi, Florida Gators fans. We have disagreed on this quite a bit over recent years, right? Which is fair, right? I'll give you that. But I will say, one of the issues that, similar to screens and jet sweeps, I do think that one of the issues was wanting a guy like Hayden Hansen to be used like Kyle Pitts, to perform like Kyle Pitts. It's a guy like he's not getting yards after the catch. So yeah, that's not his job. That's not what he's supposed to, that's what he was asked to do. That's not what he's supposed to be asked to do, right? Keep him in line, let him block, let him be like a fourth or fifth option on an offense. And that's what he should be for an offense, right? Like that's where he should be. That's his role. Buster Faulkner has shown the ability to actually use guys properly in that area, right? We've seen him do. I mean, Jackson Hawes got drafted out of Georgia Tech, and he was an inline blocker that was like, all right, hey, go vertical every now and then, or move the sticks. That's it. That's your job. You're not supposed to be a big part of the game plan. That matters. That is where we talk about, like, all right, and again, I'm a Hayden Hansen guy. I got no problem saying it. He shouldn't have been top 5 on the team in targets on the year, but he was. He should have been behind 4, maybe 5 receivers, at least 1 running back, but he wasn't. Right? He was blocking, he was relied on out there. Luke Harpring, and now we're going to Luke Harpring, who was at Georgia Tech last year, right? Played 36.4% of passing snaps in the slot in 2025. Brett Seether, another Georgia Tech tight end, played 29.4% of passing snaps in the slot last year. JT Byrne, another Georgia Tech tight end, played 12.4% of passing snaps in the slot. And Josh Beetham spent 17.5% of passing snaps in the slot. Hayden Hansen was at 20.1%. So between Luke Harpring, Brett Seether, then that'd be Hayden Hansen, then Josh Beetham, then JT Byrne, no other Gators tight end played much in passing situations, right? Tony Livingston was used mostly as a blocker. And Amir Jackson just didn't really play much. And hate that, right? Like I can be a Hayden guy. I go, hey, Amir Jackson should have been out there for specifically for passing situations, but he should have just been out there more. This offseason, the Gators brought in Harpring. So again, that's 36.4% of passing snaps in the slot. Kept Amir Jackson. Brought in Lakota Dipri from James Madison, who spent 28.4% of his passing snaps in the slot. And Evan Shika, who spent 34.2% in the slot. Okay? If you want to play in this offense, you got to be able to play in the slot. Unless you are a pure inline blocker like a JT Byrne or a Josh Beetham. Right? Like you got to be able to play in the slot. You also do have to be able to play in line because you're going to be asked to play in line and you're going to be asked to block. But you have to be able to play in the slot and be a pass catching threat there. Unless you are a pure inline blocker, which like that should have been Hayden Hansen, right? Like pure inline blocker. Honestly, 20.1% is too much, but it's also too low if we're talking about the tight end playing the most slot snaps. Like, that's what it is. Hayden should have been in line more. Florida, your top receiving tight end should have been playing in the slot more, especially if you're going 12 personnel. That's what it is. Again, 12 personnel was not the issue. Just like screens were not the issue. Just like jet sweeps or pop passes were not the issue. It was always how Billy did everything. That was always the issue. And when you're talking about Buster Faulkner, putting tight ends in space is huge. Whether that's putting them in line and then motioning them into the slot, whether that's just lining them up in the slot, whether that's putting them in the backfield and putting them in the slot, like whatever it is that you're doing, getting them in space matters. Because when you put guys in space as blockers, right? Because even when you're running the football, if they're in the slot, odds are they're more likely to have a defensive back on them, right? Especially if you've got two slot receivers on that side and they're the one closer to the perimeter, then you're more likely to have a slot receiver there or a slot DB there or safety. That gives you a big size advantage for whoever your tight end is. He's going to be bigger than any nickel, and he's going to be bigger than any safety and any corner. Like, that gives you a big advantage there. So Buster is going to try to get guys there. That blocking advantage is huge. Also, we could talk about how a lot of these tight ends that are big dudes, you going up against a 6-foot corner, they might be able to jump higher than, like they might have a higher vert, but you've probably got longer arms. You're probably going to be able to box him out a little bit. Like, so you have that receiving advantage in a way, but creating separation, not likely. And we don't really want to see you force tight window throws, right? And so I think that's the trade-off of like, yes, go ahead and try to, that's like the Hezzy Kent argument, right? Of like, oh, well, these DBs, they're not going to be able to body Hezzy Kent. And say, yeah, but they're going to be covering him. They're going to be on him. They've got long arms. It's not as difficult as you think to disrupt a receiver there. You break the wrist and you go. Not literally break the wrist, but when they're trying to catch you, bring the wrist down and go. You go, all right, you're making a one-hand catch, you're making a hard-ass catch, then you're making a hard-ass catch. That is what it is. Right? Like, you live with that, especially if you're facing someone as big as you can is. But then that mismatch, if you bring a linebacker out there, then guess what? That means there's one less linebacker in the box. You've got 5 offensive linemen. Even if they've got 5 defenders out there, that's one less linebacker. You can play around with numbers blocking wise. You can. Teams leave guys unblocked intentionally often so that they can come around and make a play and get running and get in space. You got a pulling guard out there. Go ahead. All right. Like, now you got a guard on the linebacker and then space. Next guy that's going to come close to use a safety, and a running back has to make a guy miss, which running backs should be able to do. Okay. That also means that if you have an athletic tight end out there, they are going to have an advantage running routes against some of these linebackers. Like it's about creating mismatches. It's about using guys properly. And when it comes down to it, I think that was maybe the biggest issue with Florida's offense last year. Is there were so many guys and so many things that Billy wanted to do, but didn't do efficiently at all. And it's just like, what the hell is the point then? Like, I don't even get what you're trying to do at that point. If you're going, hey, we're going to have these tight ends lining up in the slot, but he's 6'8", 270 pounds, not agile. I don't know what the move is then. Put Amir out there if you're going to do that. Get someone agile. Right? And again, as a Hayden guy, I had no issue ever saying Amir should have been playing more. Especially if you're going to go 12 personnel, that should be the thing. So for Buster, it's about using guys effectively and putting defenses in spots where you have to make decisions and you have to be smart. And the thing with college football players is that that's incredibly difficult to do consistently. That's why I say it all the time. College, it's why I don't really gamble on college sports at all. It's that, these college kids, like, they're very volatile. They're young, they're inconsistent, they're volatile. You can't expect them to do things consistently at a high level. That's where, as a coach, you go, all right, let's create issues for you. Let's make you do that. And when you don't do that, we're going to exploit you there. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free, both in the podcast and on YouTube. We will be back later on today to talk more Florida Gators. For Locked On Gators, I am Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all of my written work about the Florida Gators with Swamp Signal at Substack.com. I'll see you all next time.